Professor Sybil Patricia Trelawney was a half-blood witch, a seer, and Professor of Divination at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. She is the great-great-granddaughter of the celebrated Cassandra Trelawney, who was also a seer. This is the life of Sybil Trelawney. Sybil was born on March 9th, approximately between 1955 and 1960, to a Muggle mother and a wizard father. She was born into the Trelawney family, who had a history of seers throughout the generations. There are actually 3 generations between her and Cassandra Trelawney, who was a renowned seer. Known in the family since Cassandra had possessed the second sight. Presumably purchasing or inheriting her wand at the age of 11, Sybil attended Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, which she referred to as her home. Being sorted into Ravenclaw House by 1973 at the very latest, she may have been a member of the Slug Club because of her ancestry alone. In her 3rd year, Sybil presumably took Divination as one of her elective subjects and achieved high grades in her Owl and Newt exams. She married early, but the marriage ended in unforeseen circumstances due to Sybil's refusal to adopt the surname Higglebottom. She had no children. After graduating Hogwarts, Sybil drifted throughout the wizarding world, trying to gain employment based on her ancestry, but scorning those who did not offer what she felt was the rightful treatment of a true seer. Either late in 1979 or early in 1980, Sybil, who by this point had begun making false predictions, arranged a meeting with Albus Dumbledore in the Hogshead Inn where she was staying, in the hopes of acquiring the position of Professor of Divination at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Dumbledore agreed to give her a chance because of her ancestry. Sybil, however, displayed none of Cassandra's divinatory skills, which disappointed Dumbledore, even though he was actually planning on discontinuing the subject anyway. After courteously telling her she was not fit for the position, Sybil entered a real trance and made the prophecy about Voldemort's defeat, which read as follows: "The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches, born to those who have thrice defied him, born as the 7th month dies. And the Dark Lord will mark him as his equal, but he will have power the Dark Lord knows not, and either must die at the hand of the other, for neither can live while the other survives." Sybil's prophecy secured her job. However, it so happened that the Death Eater Severus Snape was eavesdropping at the door, which placed Trelawney in great danger from Lord Voldemort. Hoping to protect Sybil, Dumbledore hired her. As a professor, Trelawney taught in the Divination classroom on the 7th floor of the North Tower. She presumably also ran the Divination workshop. She made many predictions over her time at Hogwarts, and Professor Minerva McGonagall once claimed that she predicted the death of one of her students every year, none of whom had yet died. Professor Trelawney very rarely attended meals in the Great Hall with the rest of the school, preferring to remain in her tower. She appeared to be acquainted with certain people, but frequently clashed with Professor McGonagall. During the 1993-94 school year, Professor Trelawney gained Harry Potter as a student, who had only chosen to take Divination because his friend Ron Weasley had. She opened her lesson with normal fortune teller practices and vague predictions, including that Neville Longbottom would break at least 1 teacup, something Lavender Brown was dreading would happen on October 16th, and that around Easter, one of her students would have to leave the class forever. During a class on tea leaves, Trelawney saw the Grim, a well-known omen of death, in Harry Potter's teacup. This visibly disturbed the class, who went rather shaken to Transfiguration with Professor McGonagall. After Neville broke 2 teacups, Lavender Brown's rabbit Binky was killed, and Hermione Granger, after being greatly insulted by Professor Trelawney, stormed out of a lesson. Lavender and Parvati Patil became great supporters of Trelawney afterwards. During Christmas, Trelawney decided to join the small dinner in the Great Hall. However, once she saw the amount of people at the table, she tried to refuse, claiming that if she joined, they would become a party of the unlucky number 13, and the first to rise would be the first to die. An impatient McGonagall stated that they would risk it. 2 hours later, both Harry and Ron bolted up from their seats, causing Trelawney to nervously ask which one of them got up first. McGonagall dryly joked that unless there was a mad axeman waiting in the entrance hall to slaughter the first person he saw, it made little difference. However, Ron was accompanied by Scabbers at the time, who, unbeknownst to all, was actually Peter Pettigrew, thus meaning that the 13 dined at the table. As Dumbledore stood to welcome Trelawney, he was the first to rise from a table of 13 and also the first to die, meaning that Trelawney predicted the death of Dumbledore years before the event actually occurred. While conducting the third year exams with the Gryffindors, Professor Trelawney, while invigilating Harry Potter, entered a trance and made a prediction that Voldemort's servant would be freed, returning to him that very night. When she returned to normal, seconds later, she could not remember anything happening. Harry later told this to Professor Dumbledore, who jokingly said that he should offer her a pay rise for making a total of 2 real prophecies. The following year, the Triwizard Tournament took place at Hogwarts and Harry Potter was one of the chosen champions. Trelawney continued to annoy him with increased predictions of his death. She guessed that Harry had lost his parents because he was born during midwinter, heralding a tragic life. However, Harry told her he was born in July. Unbeknownst to Harry, who was the final Horcrux, Voldemort was born in December. So Trelawney's prediction of a tragic life was in fact accurate. Once, Rita Skeeter, in the form of a beetle, eavesdropped upon Harry during Trelawney's lesson when Harry had a crisis caused by his scar. Trelawney was very excited and pressed Harry to tell her what had happened, saying that she had experience in these matters and that the clairvoyant vibrations of her room could allow him to see further than he had ever seen before. Unfortunately for Trelawney, Harry refused. At the end of the year, Trelawney learned about the death of Cedric Diggory and the return of Lord Voldemort. The Second Wizarding War had begun. Early on in the 1995-96 school year, Dolores Umbridge was made Hogwarts High Inquisitor by the Ministry and appeared in Trelawney's classroom with a clipboard making notes. Trelawney saw this as an intrusion and was most upset and angered by it. Umbridge asked Trelawney to justify her teaching techniques and required a prediction from her. Trelawney was at first indignant and haughtily claimed that the inner eye did not see upon command. Unimpressed, Umbridge made to leave. Panicked, Trelawney attempted to persuade Umbridge that she could suddenly see great danger in her future, but the High Inquisitor remained unmoved. Whether Trelawney had actually seen Umbridge in danger in the forest at the end of the year, or whether she just made it up based on the Defense Against the Dark Arts course, is unknown. During free time that year, Professor Trelawney was visited in her tower by Lavender Brown and the Patil twins, who had additional sessions of divination with her. Umbridge later put Professor Trelawney on probation, which greatly distressed and insulted her. She became uncharacteristically brisk and started drinking a large amount of cooking sherry, which she had hidden in the room of requirement. Harry Potter noted that Trelawney became more harassed and bedraggled in appearance, like she was falling apart at the seams. Umbridge would stalk Trelawney during every one of her lectures, interrupting her increasingly hysterical talks with difficult questions regarding heptomology and ornithomancy, insisting that Sybil predict her students' answers before they actually gave it to her, and demanding she demonstrate her skills at the crystal ball, tea leaves, and runestone in turn. Umbridge states that she saw no improvement in Trelawney's performance to the point that she could not predict tomorrow's weather. After Harry Potter stood up to Professor Umbridge by giving an interview to The Quibbler, edited by Xenophilius Lovegood, Trelawney showed her support by breaking her usual pattern of predicting horrible deaths for Harry, instead predicting that he would have a long life, become Minister for Magic, and have 12 children, a prediction that made Umbridge very unhappy. Eventually, Trelawney was dismissed by Umbridge, who almost threw her bodily from the castle, gleefully relishing the fact that Trelawney was in paroxysms of grief over her dismissal. Before she could be chased off the premises, however, Dumbledore came to her aid and insisted that she stay at Hogwarts, as Umbridge had no authority to banish her from the school grounds. This was partially to protect Trelawney from Voldemort, who would target her for making the prediction concerning Harry and himself. Despite not having much respect for Trelawney, Professor McGonagall comforted her as best she could and helped Phileas Flitwick and Pomona Sprout get her back inside to her tower. Trelawney was replaced by the centaur Firenze, appointed by Dumbledore himself. Much to Umbridge's shock and fury, she hated both the fact that Firenze was what she called a half-breed, and that Dumbledore appointed someone without consulting her first. Firenze taught in Classroom 11 rather than the North Tower, where Trelawney remained living. She was finally reinstated to her teaching position after Umbridge was suspended. This meant that, since Dumbledore could not ask him to return to the herd that tried to kill him, she would have to share classes with Professor Firenze, a fact that she was not pleased with. During the 1996-97 school year, Professor Trelawney attended the start of term feast and sat next to Professor Hagrid. That same year, Trelawney and Firenze divided the students between them by year. Trelawney taught the 5th and 6th years, but she continued to drink due to her humiliation of working with a horse. At Horace Slughorn's Christmas party, Trelawney was morosely drunk. She spent the night listening to Luna Lovegood's speeches on the Rotfang conspiracy and that Rufus Scrimgeour was a vampire. Surprisingly, she seemed rather interested in what Luna had to say. In mid-March, Professor Trelawney demanded, quite unsuccessfully, that Professor Dumbledore fire Firenze. The meeting was cut short when Harry Potter arrived for one of his private lessons with the headmaster. Later, Sybil attempted to enter the room of requirement, but was thrown out by Draco Malfoy, who apparently used Peruvian instant darkness powder to conceal his identity. Harry Potter found her sprawled on the floor and helped her up immediately. He encouraged her to accompany him to Dumbledore's office to tell the headmaster exactly what had happened to her. On the way, she started talking about the day she was hired. When Trelawney mentioned that the eavesdropper had been Severus Snape, Harry left her standing in the corridor and ran to confront Dumbledore with this information. She stated that she missed having Harry in her classes, and even though he was never much of a seer, he was a wonderful object. During the 1997-98 school year, Voldemort had taken over Hogwarts and made Severus Snape headmaster. Electo Carroll replaced the murdered Muggle Studies teacher Charity Burbage, and Amarcus Carroll took Snape's position as Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher, which simply became the Dark Arts. It is possible that she, like all of the other staff members, tried to protect the students from the Death Eaters. Professor Trelawney, being half-blood, was permitted to remain teaching at the school. It is unknown why Voldemort did not attempt to capture her. It's possible that since Voldemort had since turned his attention to finding the Elder Wand, he believed that any prophecy concerning him and Harry would be rendered irrelevant upon its retrieval, of which he was very wrong. Like the rest of the school, Professor Trelawney participated in the Battle of Hogwarts. She dropped a crystal ball on the head of Fenrir Greyback, knocking him out as he attacked Lavender Brown. Unfortunately, it's not known if Lavender survived or not. Trelawney continued using her wand to throw crystal balls onto the heads of many Death Eaters with a tennis-like serve. Professor Trelawney survived the Second Wizarding War and continued to teach well into the 2010s, continuing her tradition of predicting the deaths of her students. Since Firenze was welcomed back to his herd, it is possible that she taught Divination on her own again. Trelawney went on to write a book entitled My Eyes and How to See Past Them. And that is all for today's video, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. Please consider subscribing to the channel if it is your first time watching. And if you're a fan of the channel and feel like you'd like to contribute, my restructured Patreon account is up and running. And in exchange for your contribution of a minimum of $1 a month, there are many rewards you can receive, like suggesting one of my upcoming videos, exclusive Patreon only videos for you to watch, and even one-to-one Skype calls where we can hang out and talk everything Harry Potter or anything in general. So please make sure to check out some of my other videos on the left hand side of the screen. My second channel, Game of Thrones Lore, is on the right hand side of the screen. And if you want to check out some merch, I've got a merch store on the bottom right, or you can click the link in the description below. Thanks again everyone, and I hope you all have a great day.